I don't think William and Catherine see Scotland in the same way as Charles and the late Queen.
Sorry, Kinsey, I beg to differ. Well, it's possible that they won't spend the whole summer there in quite the same way that the Queen did. I think William has a bit more of an affinity to Scotland.
It's the first time I've seen you disagree with your dad, so I am taking in this moment.
Oh, it happens.
August is traditionally silly season. There was another story about Harry and Meghan up in Canada at a foundation charity do, and she was organizing the photo call, telling the founder of the organization where to stand. I still have to ask, why is the news media devoting so much space, so much time to two irrelevant people? I really don't know. Nobody's been able to answer that question yet.
Well, we knew we were going to get like fume coming out of your ears at some point. I just didn't know it was going to take 36 minutes, but we got it. Victoria. Hi, all. Welcome to Royally Unfiltered. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by Victoria Arbiter, author of Queen Elizabeth II, an Icon of Modern Monarchy. You can get that on Amazon or wherever you purchase your favorite books. And former press secretary to the late Queen Elizabeth II and King Charles III, Dickie Arbiter, to discuss the latest royal headlines. And Dickie, you have a new book on the way, On Duty with the Royals, the inside story of the modern monarchy. That's going to be available in September. I'm so excited. Can you give us any sort of tease about it? Are you excited about it?
I'm very excited about it, and I have to thank my daughter publicly, because without her it wouldn't have happened. What is it? It's not a biography. 2014 was a biography. This is more about the monarchy as it exists today, the end of an era, Charles and Diana years, communications. And I think probably Victoria might not agree. I think it's a series of essays about the monarchy. It's not a running story. And I like to think that we've exploded a lot of myths over the years that have become accepted as fact. And they really are myths. So I'd like to think that we've told an honest story about the modern monarchy, how it operates, why it operates, and why there's no alternative.
Victoria, with our attention spans, the way that they've evolved, or the opposite, thanks to social media, a book of essays seems very digestible.
That's actually the first time I've heard you describe it that way, Dad, but I think that's really perceptive. It's a series of essays. And I think what you did say when you were talking about putting this book together and the reasons behind it is the fact that the story has moved on, and it has moved on significantly, because since the last book, Harry and Meghan married and left. Andrew, we all know what's happened there. We've had a change in reign. And so with all of those changes, there's a change in how things are operating behind the scenes. And so I think really what's unique about this book is that there is no one on this planet who has experienced both sides of the royal sphere, first covering it, then being behind palace walls, and then covering it again, and seen the evolution and been a part of the evolution. And so I think in that respect, Dad really brings something very unique to the table. But I like this idea as a series of essays, because it's something that readers will be able to dip in and out of, but also be able to follow along from the story in terms of where he left off in 2014.
And of course, right here at Kinsey Schofield Unfiltered, we are going to cover the book significantly. So watch out for that. But I think we have kind of a fun episode planned today, because we're going to be talking all about Balmoral. And Dickie, you worked for the Queen. You worked for the royal family during the Queen's reign, Queen Elizabeth. What was it about Balmoral that made it so precious to Queen Elizabeth II? Was this where she was most herself?
Balmoral, I like to think, was her happy place. It's somewhere that epitomized her character. She was very much a country woman at heart, and Balmoral was just that. You know, people would say, well, Sandringham was a country residence as well. A bit of sadness attached to Sandringham, because her grandfather died there and her father died there. So it has sadness attached to it. Balmoral was somewhere she could escape to. She could let her hair down. She'd spend 2 months there, perhaps a little bit more than 2 months. It offered her everything. It offered her the countryside. It offered her country pursuits. It offered her privacy. and it offered her space and clean air up in Sandringham, which is something that is pretty rare down south of England.
And Queen Victoria called Balmoral her dear paradise. Why do you think this particular place has had such an emotional hold over generations of the royal family?
You're absolutely right. It's the generations, Kinsey. And I think because for each of them, regardless of the generation, it is the freedom, it is the fresh air, it is the wide open space, but it's also family. There are so few places in this world that the royal family can really come together in a sanctuary that is completely undisturbed. It's somewhere where they can be free to be who they are without worrying about people hiding in the bushes. And actually, there was a wonderful documentary released in 1992. I'm sure you are familiar with it, but your viewers will be able to see it. It was made to mark the 40th anniversary of the Queen's accession. It's called Elizabeth R, A Year in the Life of the Queen. Anyway, in this, towards the end of the documentary, we hear in her own words why it was that Balmoral was so special. And she said it was a place where she could hibernate, somewhere that she liked to be able to sleep in the same bed for 6 weeks. But she also addressed what it meant to the children. And she said that for them, the children and grandchildren, they felt a sense of freedom there. And I thought that was very telling. She said that you could walk or ride for miles and miles and not see another soul, that there were endless possibilities. And even Princess Eugenie has described it as somewhere, as a space where you have room to breathe and run. And I think that really speaks to the fact that for a royal family that is so in the fishbowl, they're never off duty. You can see why it would be so appealing, simply because it's somewhere where they can just go and switch the switch and just relax.
Absolutely. And Dickie, you explained something to me not too long ago, because we were talking about how St. George's Chapel independently fundraises. And you were saying, yeah, certain things are owned by the Crown Estate, certain things are not. It's my understanding that Balmoral is privately owned rather than belonging to the Crown Estate. Is that true? And does that distinction actually change how the royal family behaves there, or how protective they are of it?
Balmoral is owned by the monarch, is owned by the Queen. It was owned by the Queen, it's now owned by Charles. It was bought by Queen Victoria and Prince Albert around about 1852. And Balmoral is not the original house. The original house was somewhere 100 yards away, but it was too small. They knocked it down. They built what we know today as Balmoral Castle. And it's very much a private residence. And it is not owned by the state. It is funded by them. It is maintained by them, not by the taxpayer. So it is very much a home. It's a large home. It's a home where the whole family can be entertained, but it is not a burden on the state. Some people seem to think that both Sandringham and Balmoral are a burden on the state. They're not. They're paid for by the sovereign, previously by Queen Elizabeth, previously by George VI, and so on back. So it is a private estate. It is somewhere where they can let their hair down, where they can relax, where, as Victoria said, they completely switch off. But it's not somewhere that Charles spends a lot of time. We're going to talk about Birk Hall. Birk Hall was owned by the Queen Mother. She bought it from her daughter shortly after the loss of her husband in 1952. And she developed it, and she left it to Charles. And that's where he spends a lot of time rather than in the big house, Balmoral. But he does go over there with Queen Camilla when they're entertaining, and they have house guests, when they entertain the Prime Minister and his wife. Which happens near the end of the Balmoral season. So it is used, it is open a lot more than it used to be to the public, to visitors, than it was under Queen Elizabeth II. But Charles does prefer Birk Hall. It's not as big, but it is something very personal to him, because it was his grandmother's, very much like Clarence House was his grandmother's. And he feels a presence there of her. He had a very close relationship with her. So he feels more at home there than he ever did at Balmoral, although he loved Balmoral as a child.
Victoria, do we think that he has opened up Balmoral more to the public because Birk Hall is his sanctuary, and so he wants Balmoral to have some life, to have some energy roaming through it?
It's certainly one way of thinking, Kinsey, but I think when we look at the late Queen's reign, so much of what she did was just ingrained in the British psyche. You could tell the time by what the Queen was doing throughout the year. And so for them, her going to spend 3 months at Balmoral in the summer, well, that's what she did. And she had earned the right, and nobody begrudged that. I think when the King came along, he recognized that people wanted to see they were getting value for money, and that they were getting to see the royal family do more things, that they were also getting to see that these palaces and these homes, private or not, were being opened up to the public. So I think it's pretty savvy, actually, of him, the way he has opened up Balmoral for more time of the year so that people can go and enjoy it and understand it and see the appeal. So certainly, I think your suggestion that makes a lot of sense. If he's going to be at Birk Hall, well, sure, why not open up Balmoral so that you can raise the funds to maintain it and oversee the upkeep, because that is a costly endeavor. But I think more it's the fact that he is a new sovereign, and there are new expectations associated to a new sovereign. And so he's trying to do that thing where he's showing how hard he's working, but he's also opening up the palaces, but he's also trying to find a bit of time to relax as well.
Just adding to that, Kinsey, this is not saying that Queen Elizabeth didn't open Balmoral. It was open at certain times of the year. In fact, when she went up there, it was usually still open, and she stayed at Creggan Lodge, which is a 7-bedroom lodge about 20 miles, 25 miles from the actual castle. I stayed there a few times, and it's a lovely home. Well, you know, I've got a name drop once in a while. But yeah, Balmoral Castle was open under the Queen's reign, but it's opened a lot more under Charles's reign, because he's not there as often as the Queen was. He does go there, as I mentioned a moment ago, when it comes to entertaining and house guests, and when the Prime Minister comes, but he's not there permanently like the late Queen was.
Dickie, Victoria made the point that there, you know, like clockwork, there was a reliability or a stability to Queen Elizabeth's schedule. And we did know, you know, we look at our own calendars and go, oh, she's going to disappear for 3 months. So we know exactly what's coming. And we know that the next big event on the royal calendar is. Do you see a similar pattern with King Charles, or do you feel like he kind of keeps us on our toes more so than Queen Elizabeth did?
He keeps us on our toes a lot more than Queen Elizabeth did. Yes, we could set our clocks by her schedule up to Balmoral at the end of July until the beginning of October, pretty much like Sandringham. She'd go there just before Christmas. She'd come back after February the 5th. The significance of February the 5th, that was the day her father died in 1952, and she always stayed there for quiet contemplation. People used to say to me, well, how does she celebrate her accession? You don't celebrate the death of your father. So it would be quiet contemplation, prayer privately. So you could set your clock by their movements. I'm not sure you can quite set your clock by Charles's movements. He's not as rigid as his mother was. So he'll spend time at Balmoral, more time at Birk Hall, back to London, or maybe up to the Castle of May, which was his grandmother's, which was left to him as well. So he's got a lot of choices when he's in Scotland.
I know he is, and he's a pretty active guy. So that keeps us busy too. Victoria, when the royal family arrives at Balmoral, how comfortable do they really get? Because Dickie's going to hate me for referencing this, but you know, you see the crown, all of a sudden they are putting on their comfy wellies and they're jumping in the Range Rover. Is it, you know, are they throwing on old clothes, barbecuing and behaving like any other family on holiday when they're there?
Well, first of all, I'm so glad you referenced that, Kinsey, because it's a perfect opportunity to remind everybody that The Crown is a dramatization. It is taking real life events and dramatizing them. So yes, I think really what is so charming about Balmoral, and the reason the royals all love it so much, is because it is so informal. It's like there isn't that same regimented structure to every day. There is a big emphasis on outdoorsy. So whether that is brisk walks in the rain, picnics, barbecues, hunting, fishing, going for long rides, whatever it is, everyone is encouraged to be outdoors. Unfortunately, the royal family collectively, they love to be outdoors. They love that wide open space. They don't care a jot about the weather. But of course, what happens with other people when they go up there, because of course, I suspect you're going to reference this rumored mythical Balmoral test that everybody likes to talk about. And I don't, Dad can speak to this more than I can, but I think there's there's a heavy amount of dramatization on that. It's simply come about, this idea, because people like Margaret Thatcher, by comparison to the royal family, was not an outdoorsy kind of lady. She really didn't have any interest in outdoor pursuits. She didn't care to pull on her wellies and go for a big walk. So she would often arrive with the inappropriate attire. Her biographer went so far as to describe her time up there as purgatory. And she also found that this forced relaxation just really got in the way of her running the country. So she didn't love it up there. And I think in order to really embrace that Balmoral lifestyle, which the royals do widely, you have to love all of those things. And they do. Just going back to that documentary I mentioned earlier, the Queen said in that they love picnics, they love open air, they just love to be outside. There's charming footage of her taking the young cousins, her grandchildren or young cousins, together out on a little pony trek. William is leading a very young Princess Beatrice in her red welly boots on top of Smokey, her pony. That's what they like to do, and it's one of the very few places in the world that they are able to do it. But it's not everyone's cup of tea.
I've got to add here that picnics is not a case of throwing a rug on a lawn and emptying the hamper of cut-off sandwiches and cucumber sandwiches and bottles of whatever. They're usually in log cabins because the weather can be so inclement and unpredictable up there that there are several log cabins dotted all over the place. I remember when I joined, I arrived at Balmoral, it was chucking it down, cats and dogs. It was, and the footman said, "I'll take you to your room, sir, and then we're going on a picnic." And he sort of looked at me and he said, "No, don't worry, you're going to a log cabin." Cut a long story short, went to this log cabin. Late Queen drove me there. And we had four of us there for lunch: Queen, Prince Philip, lady in waiting, myself. I did the wash, started doing the washing up. She said, "No, I'll wash, you dry." That's how relaxed it was. So picnics tend to be in log cabins. Second day, there was an evening barbecue in a log cabin by the River Dee. So they do take into consideration about the weather. Victoria mentioned Margaret Thatcher. She was a fish out of water at Balmoral. She arrived in the wrong clothes. She wasn't appropriately dressed. She was a workaholic, and being up at Balmoral was frivolity to her. She wanted to be back at Downing Street or at Chequers, going through her boxes of work. So most people can take to Balmoral. There are the odd exceptions that can't or won't. Margaret Thatcher was one of those who couldn't and wouldn't. So it doesn't appeal to everybody, but it does appeal to the majority.
Hey everyone, Kinsey Schofield here, and I want to tell you about today's sponsor. It's a total game changer, Peak's Liver Detox Protocol. You may not know it, but your liver handles a lot: energy, hormones, digestion, and even your mood. But with all the stress and toxins from everyday life, it needs some love. Forget harsh cleanses. Peak delivers gentle daily support inspired by traditional Chinese medicine. Their routine uses two simple blends. The first is a warming turmeric mix with cinnamon and black pepper, designed to help the body absorb it better and support the liver while calming inflammation. The second is a ginger and cinnamon blend that helps with blood flow, digestion, bloating, and immune support. The magic is how they work together to activate and flush for better digestion, stable energy, less brain fog, and that light, clear feeling. My energy is consistent, my skin is clear, and less bloating. That's Peak, where spirit meets science. Redefine your standard of health, secure 20% off your order, and begin your intentional wellness journey today at peaklife.com/Kinsey. That's PIQUE life.com/Kinsey. Thanks so much. Victoria, it's so funny that your dad says Margaret Thatcher was a workaholic, because I would consider King Charles a workaholic, but somehow he can still enjoy that escape. Is that because he's done it since he was a young man, or do you think that he just sees the value of checking out and enjoying the environment and clean air and just the escape?
Well, King Charles certainly does, as we all know, love to be out in nature. The environment is one of his primary causes. But also members of the royal family, they've spent their whole lives traveling around and taking their work with them. The Prime Minister, you think of sort of being more at Downing Street or at Chequers, but the royals, whether it's Easter Court at Windsor, the summer at Balmoral, Christmas at Sandringham, the work goes with them. The red boxes go with the monarch. The Queen said that the only day off from her red boxes was Christmas Day and Easter Sunday. So he's used to taking his work with him. He's got a study where he can get to it. And his children used to say, the boys used to say, that he would often fall asleep at his desk with sort of the black ink pen has just scrawled over the page as he's fallen asleep while signing a signature. But I think Charles is just perfectly capable and attuned to taking the work with him everywhere he goes. So whether he's doing that work at Highgrove, at Burke Hall, at Sandringham, it doesn't matter. The work just goes with him.
Take a break, Guy. We think things will still function. Dickie, you mentioned your sweet story about washing dishes with Queen Elizabeth, and other people have told stories about the shock of seeing Queen Elizabeth in these yellow rubber gloves. Are there other Balmoral habits that revealed a side of the Queen that the public rarely saw?
I'm shaking my head here because the Queen didn't wear rubber gloves. She was the archetypal woman at the sink, plunging her hands into soap suds, doing the washing up, and passing the dishes to me to dry. So they weren't rubber gloves, although Margaret Thatcher is reported to have sent up some rubber gloves the next time she was in London, so that the Queen wouldn't damage her hands. But they just go about their business at Balmoral like, you know, we do at home, albeit in a very much larger place and a very much larger and controlled environment. They love being up there. They love the family. There are, I suppose, members of the family who don't quite see Scotland in the same way. Say, I don't think William and Catherine see Scotland in the same way as Charles and the late Queen. They were brought up with it. William, not so much brought up with it. He was brought up largely in an urban environment. Yes, he'd spend holidays with his father and his grandmother up at Balmoral, but I'm not sure that they will have the same attitude to Scotland and be there as much as his grandmother and his father.
Sorry, Kinsey, I beg to differ. Because, well, William, first of all, met Catherine in Scotland at St Andrews, and he's talked very fondly of Scotland in the past and talked about how much it means to him. Of course, there is also tragedy associated to Balmoral. It's famously where he and Harry were when they learned of their mother's death. But he said he found Balmoral to be so healing, just walking for miles and miles and miles out in the fields, trying to come to terms with that sudden loss. So some people talk about William and Catherine, it's all just a PR exercise to hold on to the country and make sure the union stays strong. But I think the fact that they go up there every summer, and we've seen pictures, there's that lovely photograph, you'll know which one I mean, of the Queen and Prince Philip with all the great grandchildren that Catherine, I believe, took one time when they were up there. And I do think that William, he's cherished those relationships with his cousins and those shared experiences with his cousins, and you get to pass those on down to the children. So while it's possible that they won't spend the whole summer there in quite the same way that the Queen did, I think William has a bit more of an affinity to Scotland.
I think that that's interesting, and it's the first time I've seen you disagree with your dad, so I am taking in this moment.
Oh, it happens. No, Kinsey, it happens. Usually the privacy of the dining table, but it happens.
I do. I'm taking in this moment. Victoria, I do want to ask you, based on that, do you think Balmoral still has the same power to bring the family together now that Queen Elizabeth is gone? Because we're talking a lot about Queen Elizabeth right now. Is Charles able to recreate that gravitational pull that Queen Elizabeth had?
You know, Kinsey, I think so many people will have these childhood traditions that they try to hold on and pass down to their own children, places that are just intrinsically special for so many different reasons. So, yes, I think the fact that this summer the royals will go up there and they will join the king sporadically. They may not all be there at the same time, but I think it's the power of the place more than the person who is the family's head at any given one moment. I think they have all cherished the freedom that that it affords, the fact that the children can go and run and play and horse ride and fish and be out in nature. We know certainly that Catherine is a huge advocate for nature. She very much has that in keeping with her father-in-law, the king. So yes, I think while the king had the queen, excuse me, had this tremendous command over the family in terms of bringing everyone together, that was out of this shared mutual respect and an understanding of her desire to have everyone together because it happens so rarely. I think Balmoral still holds that pull in the same way. Sandringham is really the only other time I can think of when they get most of the family together. It becomes a little bit more difficult when there are in-laws to consider and other families to consider, but everyone doesn't go to Easter Court. So Balmoral is really the only other opportunity. And I think that it holds a very deep, special place in everyone's hearts. And to that, sorry, waffling a little bit, but I thought it was very telling that just before Prince Philip's funeral, the Queen chose to release a personal, private, never-before-seen photograph that really encapsulated her relationship with her husband and them in their special place. And that photograph was taken by Sophie Wessex, as she was at the time, obviously the Duchess of Edinburgh now. And it was atop the coils of Mick. And they're just sitting on a tartan blanket, looking so relaxed, so happy, so content. And I think that's what the royal family collectively feel when they're up there. It is one place where they can just all exhale. So the very long answer to your question is yes, I think it will continue to hold that pull for most of them.
No, I loved that answer. So I don't mind how long you went on at all. I loved it. When you mentioned that picture, I'd completely forgotten about that picture and my body reacted. So yes, when you describe it as exhaling, what a beautiful way to imagine that that's how they feel. Now, Dickie, Victoria mentioned this earlier. How significant is the Balmoral test? Prime Minister Andy Burnham is next, allegedly. Is this actually a real thing within royal circles, or has the myth surrounding it become bigger than the reality? And are we going to meet your cat, Victoria? I hate to interrupt Dickie.
They're both coming. They are they just love the camera. So here is one. This is Kefi, which is a Greek word meaning a state of bliss. The other one is Sully. He's my chubby one. I'm sure he'll show his face in just a moment too.
Dickie, I love a fat cat. All right, Dickie, back to you in the Balmoral test.
You say Dickie and fat cat in one breath. Are you implying something?
No, but that is a little chubby kitten back there.
Yeah, here he is.
You're talking about the Balmoral test. There's the other one, Sally.
Yes.
You're talking about the Balmoral test. I say, what test? It's a myth that's been allowed to become fact, and it was exacerbated by that drama series that some people called entertainment. I think it was called The Crown. There is no Balmoral test. I suppose one of the tests, if there is one, is how people come dressed, what people get dressed in. Margaret Thatcher, a prime example. She didn't get into a barber coat. She didn't get into wellies. She didn't get into a tweed skirt to go rambling. She just had the wrong clothes. That was what was the lady like. The only test is how you get dressed for certain events. Some events do require, say, for example, there can be a black tie dinner. You wear a tie if you go in for tea in the afternoon, a tie and a blazer or a sports jacket. There are dress codes for certain events, but generally it's how you appear, and you either know what happens in a country at a country estate, or you don't. And the best way of making sure that you've got everything is pack your whole wardrobe so you're not short of something appropriate to wear.
Am I getting my locations confused? Was it Princess Diana that didn't bring the right wardrobe when she visited for the first time?
You've got to remember, Diana was brought up in the country. She was brought up on the Sandringham estate. So, and she was brought up on the edges of the royal family. So she would know what to wear and what not to wear. But it is various prime ministers and prime ministers' wives who tend to not bring the right things. Sherry Blair was a case in point. She was a fish out of water in the countryside, a bit like Margaret Thatcher. So it really is a case of, if you don't know, ask.
Yeah.
Don't arrive in the hope that you're going to have the right things. There are a lot of people who can help you, and to ask what to wear and what not to wear.
I'm just going to assume that Spanx are always on the menu, Dickie. Victoria, Victoria, what makes Balmoral so potentially intimidating for a newcomer? Is it that it's the royal family sanctuary, or is it the myth of all these rules that we've kind of broken down over the last few minutes?
I think exactly what you said, Kinsey. It's about all these rules, all these perceived rules. In fact, Tony Blair actually summed it up reasonably well in his memoir in 2010. And he said, for him, it was very jarring. It was surreal. It was awkward. And I could understand the point he was trying to make. Here he was, this young prime minister, and he'd gone from these very formal meetings with the Queen, his weekly private audience at Buckingham Palace, where there's a certain way you behave and certain things that happen, and there are certain expectations. And then suddenly, in this sort of parallel universe, you find yourself at Balmoral and you're scraping your food off your plate with the Queen, and you're being asked to do the washing up, and you're playing parlor games. And he said that for him, that was just, he felt out of place and he felt very awkward. And that for him, the test, for want of a better word, it felt almost like a social graces test, where he was cognizant that it was the Queen, and cognizant that there is all this sort of precedent in terms of how you address the Queen and how you behave around the Queen. And yet this domesticity being displayed by the Queen and Prince Philip was really throwing him for a loop. So I think it is a bit of a minefield. He did also reference, so if you are going up, Kinsey, be warned, that apparently the evening drinks are particularly stiff and they can floor one. So I think there's just all these little pitfalls where you're just not imagining being in this very domestic environment where there's parlor games and you're pulling on your Wellington boots to go and have a muddy trudge across the field. It's just not what people imagine. But as Dad said earlier, we've got to remember that, yes, they're the royal family, but to some degree, not entirely, but to some degree, they are just like us. And they're doing private things behind closed doors that are very familiar to a lot of people. But if that's not what you're expecting, you can see why it would be a bit awkward.
Absolutely. And Dickie, you've been doing this for so long. And like, Victoria mentioned, you recovered them, you worked for them, you covered them. We're discussing this because it feels like a slow news time for the royals because they're disappearing off to Balmoral this summer. How can you prepare my audience for the desperation that comes in seeking headlines when the royals disappear? Are we going to be revisiting, headlines from 20 years ago? Are we going to start talking about the headlines that I saw that I've actually had to disagree with tonight on one outlet was that David Foster dismissed Meghan Markle. There was a handshake, and I said, I don't think that's I think we're making stuff up out of desperation. Do you see like an avalanche of just chaos when the royals disappear because there's nothing real to cover?
Well, the royals disappear in August. August is traditionally in the newspaper industry, in the news industry, silly season. So expect silly season headlines. I'll draw one in particular. Last Sunday in the Mail on Sunday, their headline was to the point where it was outrageous that Andrew was going to receive a state funeral, that plans hadn't been readjusted, which is absolute nonsense. I remember when those plans were made, when he joined the Navy and was then shipped off to the Falklands. So yeah, it's not a priority to start adjusting his arrangements because he's got a lot of mileage left in him. He's not dead yet. But when the time comes, they will adjust accordingly. So there won't be a state funeral. There will probably be a private service at St. George's Chapel. He will be buried in the Royal Burial Ground because that's what it's there for. But they made a big song and dance. In fact, it was the only newspaper that ran the story. The others didn't pick it up. So August is traditionally silly season. There was another story about Harry and Meghan up in Canada. At a foundation charity do, and she was organizing the photo call, telling the founder of the organization where to stand. These are silly season stories. I still have to ask, why is the news media devoting so much space, so much time to two irrelevant people? I really don't know. Nobody's been able to answer that question yet.
Well, we knew we were going to get like fume coming out of your ears at some point. I just didn't know it was going to take 36 minutes, but we got it. Victoria, Balmoral, you know, it's witnessed enormous moments in royal history, including Queen Elizabeth's final days, when King Charles, this is horrible to discuss, and I know some people will be unhappy with me, but when Charles eventually does pass Balmoral on to the next generation, what traditions do you think will survive, and which ones are likely to disappear with King Charles?
I think family traditions live on through generations, the ones that are so meaningful to them. And I think what's actually lovely about Balmoral is that's where all the traditions almost get thrown out of the window. It's somewhere where they're not on ceremony, they're not expected to do XYZ, they're just free to relax. So I would imagine I can still see members of the royal family going up there to spend their summer break up there, or certainly periods of their summer break up there, because it's a wonderful opportunity to come together. But as you rightly pointed out, Kinsey, it is a place that has seen so much royal history. It's remarkable when you think that Princess Elizabeth, as she was then, was at Burke Hall on the Balmoral estate when World War II was declared. 8 years later, she was at Burke Hall celebrating her honeymoon with Prince Philip. It was to Burke Hall that the Queen Mother retreated when she was grieving the loss of her husband. She said that the place was steeped in too many memories of him, which is why she decided to go further north. It's where Fergie was when those unfortunate pictures of the toe-sucking incident splashed on the front pages of the newspaper. Balmoral has got a lot of family memories, if those walls could talk. But I think it's because of all those family memories, the family folklore, the shared experiences between the cousins, the connection that they feel there to generations that have gone before. So for the Queen, it would have been the connection to her parents. For them, it would have been the connection to George V, who loved the peace and tranquility that Balmoral afforded. Every nick on the wall tells a story. And so I think in terms of just that familial experience, yes, it will continue for many generations to come, simply because of the peace, tranquility, the freedom, the space that it affords all of them.
Dickie, would you like to respond?
I think Victoria's got it partially right. I don't think it will have the same draw for the younger generation as it's had for the King and the late Queen and previous generations. Yes, they will use Balmoral. Whether they use it to the same extent remains to be seen. One day William will become king. He might find it very useful to use Balmoral, as his father has done and is doing, and his grandmother used, as a means of entertaining important people, of entertaining the Prime Minister over a weekend. He might well, everybody's talking about William modernizing. He might well get rid of that aspect of it. That is in the future, and we're not here to crystal ball gaze. Whether he has the same affinity with Balmoral and with Burke Hall that his father has, that only time will tell. Yes, they love the wide open spaces. Victoria made that point quite correctly. They love the wide open spaces, but do they love the wide open spaces to that extent of time that is spent? Charles will spend almost 2 months up there. Late Queen spent over 2 months up there. Will William and Catherine spend that amount of time up there? Because by the time their time comes, their children will be older and they'll be wanting to do other things. So it's a case of watch this space.
Yeah. Well, if the drinks are as good as Victoria said they are, it might still be the place to be, Dickie. It might.
Well, and Edward VII wasn't that crazy about Balmoral, so it can skip. It's not always going to be everyone's draw. Edward VII was much more in favour of Sandringham. He loved to be at Sandringham. So,
and yet then George
and the south of France. Then George V, though, came along and he loved it so much that he commissioned local craftsmen to come and make the wrought iron gates. So successive generations have added to the Balmoral estate. They've added to the memories. They've added to the folklore. So I don't never say never. I don't see them ever getting rid of Balmoral, but I think it'll be up to each generation to see how it is that they want to utilize it, how much time they want to spend there. It'll certainly be a very private place for George, Charlotte and Louis to take their friends and have a bit of crazy time without the press looking out for them.
Oh, how fun. Our Victoria Arbiter, author of Queen Elizabeth II, an icon of modern monarchy. Dickie Arbiter on duty with the royals, the inside story of the modern monarchy, which is going to be available in September. And you're going to come back and we're going to talk all about it. Victoria can come back. We can all talk about it. I would love that. We got to meet Victoria's kittens, her kitty cat babies today. What a thrill.
You did.
I even think I heard one. Did I hear one, Victoria?
Yes, you would have heard one. He is, I don't know if I can say this, he's a total camera whore, Kinsey.
Oh, I love
he has
that.
been asleep on the bed the entire time. And the minute he knows the camera's on, he is in. But actually, while we're talking about cats, just for any cat lovers, I do have to point out that Dad has been looking after a cat in Greece who just had kittens. So he's a very proud grandfather to Greek kittens this week as well.
Oh
so
my gosh,
we're
Dickie,
cat mad in this family, cat mad.
will you send me pictures, Dickie?
I will send you a picture.
Thank you.
I will send you a picture of before and after.
And
it's interesting because this
Yeah.
cat is ostensibly a stray. There are a lot of stray cats in Greece, but she has been coming back to me for 3 years. She can disappear for months on end because I'm not here, and then
Yeah.
she'll come back.
Because she knows that you're a sucker.
And she knows I'm a sucker, and she knows where the food is in the fridge.
Exactly. Well, will you name one of the kittens after me and Victoria? Please. Your awkward laugh is not committal, and I don't appreciate that.
I'm committing to it, Kinsey,
Thank
for
you.
sure.
Thank you
For
so
sure.
much. All right,
Kitten
well, go.
Kinsey.
Please support my friends. Please purchase their books if you haven't already, and then pre-order Dickie's, which it will be out in September. We want you to know, agree with us, disagree with us. We want to hear from you. Balmoral, what a special place. What a great escape for the British royal family. And I'm sure that they are loving the fact that we're having to talk about Queen Elizabeth in Balmoral right now because they have cut off our supply of stories. And that's fine. That's fine by me. But agree with us, disagree with us. Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. Thank you too for being with me tonight. It was such a joy. We're all over the world, so getting us all together is quite hard, but we did it. We made it work.